And at this point, I'd like to introduce our keynote for this afternoon, an amazing topic in cultural competency. And I'd like to thank co-chairs of our diversity committee, Dean and Assistant Vice President Kenneth Holmes, and our Chief Diversity Officer, Sylvia Montalban, for the help that they gave us in preparing this program and being a sponsor. So please, a hand for our diversity committee. And what I'd like to do is introduce Dr. Brown-Manning. She dedicates, I'm going to say a little bit about her, whether I know we had information in the materials. Dedicates her practice to corporate, social services, and educational institutions in areas of personal growth, parent education, leadership development, cultural diversity, and workforce management. A licensed social worker, Ms. Brown-Manning worked for many years with New York Foundling Hospital. From there, she moved on to set up and manage Foundling's Bronx Teen Parenting Program, which served as a model for future community-based adolescent pregnancy and parenting programs. During this period, she was co-founder of the Bronx Teen Pregnancy Network, serving as its co-chairperson for 10 years. She also served on the board of New York Foundling for 6 years. In 1986, she became the Foundling's director's, I can't say the word for some reason, director of parent education. Shortly after, she became the director of training and development, a position that she maintained until leaving in 1993. She became an external consultant on a full-time basis. In addition to her practice, she teaches social welfare policy and child welfare policy at Hunter College School of Social Work. She's also an adjunct at Iona College, teaching human diversity and social work. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Brown-Manning to come up and talk to us a little bit more about cultural competency and some other topics. Thank you. For some reason, I was choppy today. I don't know why, but that's the...
Good afternoon, and thank you for that gracious introduction and welcome. As I always do when I do a keynote presentation, I would like to first invoke the energies of my ancestors and invite them to be here in this space with me. And I especially call on my maternal and paternal grandmothers, Annie Mae Orange and Ada Smith, who, while they were very different personalities, they were two of the original models that I had of what it meant to be a black woman in the United States, of what it meant to breathe and feel and love and hate and forgive while wearing this body, this color, on my life's journey. I'd also like to invite the energy of another black woman, Barbara Jordan, to be present here, and I ask her to shower me with her oratory skills, that I might, during this brief time that we have together, find my voice, use silence, use power of words to provoke, to incite, to inspire, and to motivate. I invoke the spirit of Gladys V. Thorne, affectionately called by many Minnesinkers Thorny. Camp Minnesink out of Port Jervis, New York, was very instrumental in my life, and Thorny was the director of that camp for many years. It was the premier camp in the country that guided thousands of urban black youth to reach for heights unknown and to soar. Thorny, with her foresight and her wisdom, taught thousands of young black men and women, boys and girls, to show up in the world in a way that the world told us was impossible for us. It was at Camp Minnesink that I was introduced to H. Rap Brown in person, that I met Stokely Carmichael, that I met Percy Sutton, that I met Diane Carroll. They came to Minnesink and talked with us as if we were their sons and their daughters. It was also at Minnesink that I met Ulla Hammerlin, who became a lifelong friend until her transition a couple of years ago, from Stockholm, Sweden. She and I shared a cabin together as counselors when I was 16 and she was 24. And it was in that space with Ulla that I learned about the world and the universe beyond my immediate surroundings in the Bronx, and where she learned about us through our lived experiences. And so Minnesink has sent doctors and lawyers and professors and teachers and mothers and fathers and thinkers and policymakers and actors and actresses all over the map. We're everywhere, thanks to Gladys V. Thorne. And most importantly and finally, I would like to invite the spiritual energy of someone who made his transition recently and made it much too early. Someone who walked this journey with me for many, many years, and that is my late husband, who unexpectedly transitioned in November. He was my life partner, my business partner. He was the yang to my yin, and I was the yang to his yin sometimes. But we did this work together. We traveled the world and we traveled the country. He was my co-facilitator, where we helped many, many, many organizations in the corporate sector, nonprofit, educational, religious organizations, where we helped many people to have authentic voices, to tell their truths, to share their stories in ways that maybe they had never done before, and in ways that enabled them to be heard and affirmed. I miss Larry's physical presence tremendously. But I also, he just knocked my scarf off, he's always here with me. Always here with me, and I always feel his physical presence, and I always hear him in my ear. I hear him now saying to me, as he always said when he was in his body, "Robyn, don't play small. Tell your truth. Don't play small. Tell your truth." And so last night at 11 o'clock, I threw my hands up in absolute disgust. I've been doing this work since the late 80s. I understand this work. I know how to do this work. I could not put my words together last night. I wrote 6 versions of this presentation and could not get it to flow and sound the way I wanted it to sound. And I was asking myself, why is it taking me so long to do this? What's getting in the way? And I began to have a sore throat last night, and I'm still having it right now. And Louise Hay, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Louise Hay, but she writes about metaphysical manifestations of how your mind, body, and spirit connect and how it shows up in dis-ease in your body. And one of the things that she says when you have a sore throat is that you're sitting on words that you're having a hard time getting out, that there's something you need to say that's getting stuck. And so I thought about that, and then I heard Larry again. "Robyn, don't play small. Talk your truth." And so I'm going to talk my truth today. You know, Keynote addresses are supposed to be inspirational and motivational and happy, and they're supposed to just rev you up and charge you up and send you out ready to take on the world. But the world leaves me this morning or this afternoon with a heavy heart. It leaves me with a heavy heart as a black woman. It leaves me with a heavy heart as the black mother of a son who has watched too many scenes in recent years where black boys are having their lives cut short either by bullets or bars in prisons. And particularly today, I carry a heavy heart as a black Christian, as I've watched the situation in Charleston, South Carolina unfold. And so my truth today may make some people in the room uncomfortable. I may ruffle some feathers. I may say some things that have people feeling either left out or marginalized or even dismissed, and that is not my intention at all, so I apologize if in fact that is what happens for anyone. My intention is to speak truth to power in a way that both helps and moves us to healing. And so here's my truth. I don't believe in cultural competency anymore. I did at one time, but I no longer believe in it as a concept, as a practice, or as something that benefits anything that we are trying to do as a college, a university, or a nation. Paul Cavell, in his article, Social Service or Social Change, describes all of us in this room as being gatekeepers or being on what he refers to as the buffer zone, which basically says we assist, we aid in maintaining the status quo. And for me, my truth is that cultural competency has become a buzzword and a tool that we have been given, and as good, solid gatekeepers and agents, we have marketed it and we have promoted it. But my question is, to what end? Cultural competency, by definition, says if I learn a certain set of skills, if I grow in my mindfulness, if I listen astutely, I will know when, where, how, why, and what to do with any given person at any given time. And that if I do it well, if I do it very well, that person and I will link arms and walk through life singing Kumbaya and We Are the World. Cultural competency assumes that there is a destination, that there is a there, that there is something that I'm supposed to do to fix it, to get it right. But what cultural competency does is it keeps us very focused on the micro level. It keeps us focused on each other, on respecting each other, honoring each other, celebrating each other, and therefore very nicely keeps our eyes off the macro. It keeps our eyes off the systemic issues that are insidious in nature and ultimately much more problematic. Cultural competency has us looking at individual families and communities, at their mores, their norms, and their values, and learning those and understanding those and maybe even eating some of the traditional foods. But it doesn't pay attention to the fact that many families organize themselves and their structures as a way of adapting to the systemic oppression that says to them, you are less than, you are of lesser value than other groups in this country. Cultural competency does not look at that. It keeps us looking at each other, and therefore, we're not paying attention at what's going on at the higher level. And that's what Paul Cavell is talking about when he says that we very conveniently and unwittingly become the gatekeepers that keep these systems in place. So that's part of my truth. And as my hands were up in the air and as I was going crazy yesterday about getting this together, I said, let me put it aside and let me watch the news and see what happened in the world today. And I turned on the TV. It was about 6 o'clock. And at 6:01, the anchors began presenting the news. And here's what I heard. A 21-year-old white male named Dylan had been arrested as a suspect in killing 9 black churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina, because, and I quote, "You are raping our women and taking over our country." Second item in the news, 25-year-old black male arrested or being sought as a suspect in hitting randomly selected Asian women in their faces with hard objects because, and I quote, "He is angry at Asian women for ignoring him and not giving him their phone numbers." Third item on the news, 23-year-old black male arrested as a suspect in Nassau County for murder and robbery of a gas station attendant whose last name sounds Middle Eastern. Fourth item on the news, 25-year-old black male shot by police officer as a suspect in vandalizing a car in Brooklyn. Fifth item on the news, Donald Trump announced that he is running for president and cited as fact that Mexico is sending rapists and murderers across the borders to do harm in the United States. Sixth item in the news, Rachel Dolezal, who was born biologically and racially white, chooses and declares that she is actually a black woman. It's now 16 minutes after 6. The rest of the news, the remaining 14 minutes, is devoted to weather, traffic, economy, and sports. But 16 minutes of a 30-minute news broadcast, through my lens and my ears, was focused on issues of race. White male kills black parishioners, black male kills Middle Eastern gas attendant, white female declares that she is black, Mexicans, although this is more about ethnicity and immigration, are rapists and murderers coming to do harm in the United States. So why am I having trouble talking about cultural competence? Because it's not about cultural competence. The conversation is about race. And what cultural competency has very nicely done to us as a country, to us as academics, to our students, is that it has neutralized the dialogue. It has had us talking about many things, and I will be the first to say that all of these things are very, very, very important. But you know what? And here's where my sore throat is kicking up. If I am to speak truth to power, race tends to trump them all. Because if you were talking about women, and if you add the complexity of race to it, you're having a different kind of conversation. Read Bell Hooks and Patricia Hill Collins. If you're talking about transgender issues, and you add black or people of color to it, it's another conversation. It's another level of complexity. Audre Lorde talks about it in terms of sexual orientation. Dr. Courtney Ziegler of the Transgender Law Center says that the recent deaths of several trans women of color signify the severe reality of injustice they endure in the face of systemic racism. If you're talking about Asians or Latinos or Italians, and you address issues of colorism, the darker you are, the more challenges you have in your families and your communities. The conversation is not about competence, it's about race. And what cultural competence has allowed us to do, yet again, is avoid the very conversation that the United States must finally engage in if we are to have any of these other conversations in a truly authentic manner. I have worked in countless organizations in this country with countless groups where we have focused on diversity, cultural humility, where we have focused on cultural competence, and where Larry and I tripped over ourselves, almost killed ourselves, trying to bring marginalized voices, dismissed voices into the conversation, trying to decentralize the black-white conversation. And I don't care what the topic was or where we were in the country. We could be talking about different abilities. We could be talking about religion. We could be talking about age. Somehow, that black-white conversation kept getting in there and kept trumping whatever else was on the table. It trumps it because it looms large in our country. What we try to ignore, what we try to pretend is not there, what we try to say was addressed through laws and policies in the mid-'60s is looming large, and nobody's talking about it. And we can't move toward resolution if we won't even have the conversation. So it's not about cultural competency, it's about race. And I submit to you that cultural competence is being used as the new Kool-Aid, and we are all drinking it, and we're all pretending, myself included, that we are doing these remarkable things in a post-racial America when we are actually moving backwards. When we have a 21-year-old boy, he was born in 1994. He is a baby. I'm almost 64, my world. He's a baby, 21 years old, talking about, I'm killing black folks because they are raping my women, and they are taking over my country. He is the generation we had hoped for. He is the child of the people that I worked with in the late 80s, in the early 90s, who said, our kids are going to be different. They're going to inherit a different kind of United States. This is not going to be an issue for him. Because, and the reason they knew this was going to be so true, because we are culturally competent. We know how to do this. We know how to have conversations with each other. We know how to treat each other and celebrate each other, and we're going to teach our children how to do that. Back in the 80s and 90s, when I first started my consulting business, I would get all kinds of calls, and Larry and I were working all over the world, all over the country. We had 83 people actually working with us. That's how huge it was. And we were being called in to do work around, they didn't even call it LGBT issues back then. I can't even remember what the name was, but they would say, you know, that that there's an issue here for people who are gay and straight coming together to work. Can you help us look at what we need to do differently so that we are culturally competent in this area? And we would go in and we'd run what was called at that point diversity awareness sessions and all kinds of different sessions, and we'd help create affinity groups, et cetera. And organizations would call us in, particularly the corporate sector, come in and do some work with us about women, because women are being marginalized. They're not getting the better projects. They're not being moved up in the organization. They're challenging us about their pay scale. We would get those calls all the time, and we would get the calls about come in and help us with race. So fast forward to 2015, maybe back to 2005, 10 years ago. We don't get called in to do the issues around sexual orientation anymore. Excuse me. We don't get called in to talk about women's issues anymore. We get called in all over the country to talk about race. We get called in regularly to talk about the fact that we're having challenges recruiting. We're having challenges hiring. We're having challenges retaining. We're having challenges promoting. We're having challenges with communication. We get calls all the time about that. And it's not just my organization. Thank you. It's not just my organization. The People's Institute out of New Orleans, they can barely keep up with the request around the country to come in and do Undoing Racism workshops. I've been participating in a 10-month series for my own development with Dr. Kenneth Hardy, some of you may know, who's a marriage and family therapist out of Drexel University. This 10-month series is called A Conversation About Race, and about 10 of us come together once a month. We're all therapists of some sort, and we sit together and we grapple with the tough issues around race. And we supposedly know how to do this and facilitate this, and we are having a hard time in the conversation. This is tough stuff. It's not about cultural competence, it's about race. And the question is, particularly when I look at those ages that I mentioned that came up on the news yesterday, the vast majority of those ages were 25 and younger. So this is a generation that we had hoped for who was struggling. And the question becomes, for all of us to grapple with, is are we courageous? Are we courageous enough? Are we brave enough to do something different? And that different, what that might look like, it might right now just be as simple as naming it and calling a thing, and stop trying to jazz it up. It's not diversity. It's not embracing tolerance. It's not cultural competency. It's not cultural humility. It is tackling the issue of race and racism and the damage it's done throughout this country, and that then we've sold internationally the damage it's done to so many people, to so many people. Can we name that? As personnel in a university, do we have, particularly faculty members who are here, do we have the unmitigated gall to examine a case study that we present in a classroom? Do we have the gall to present it from the lens of race, even if there is no person of color in the scenario? Because even when there's no person of color in the scenario, race is present. We've got young white men committing mass murders in predominantly white schools all over this country. But the metal detectors are being placed in black and brown schools where, to my knowledge, there have been no mass murders. That's an issue of race, and we're not talking about it. We ain't talking about it, and it's right there in front of all of our faces. Even the fact that we have white schools and black and brown schools is an issue of race in the United States of America. Why does that exist? Do we have the courage to question any theoretical analyses that we discuss in class from a racial standpoint in an effort to broaden perspectives? Do we have that courage? Can we demand that every syllabus, regardless of the course, that every syllabus embeds readings and assignments that obligate students to consider the myriad ways that policies, laws, frameworks, and theories perpetuate the types of messages that make it okay for a Dylan to shoot black church parishioners, for a Donald to denigrate an entire ethnic group, that keep a Dolezal from embracing and celebrating who she is, rather than opting to be something or someone that my lens, I own it, that she is not. Diversity taught us that there are multiple identities in the world. Check mark, we got that, we mastered it. Cultural competency has taught us to respect and to respond to the uniqueness of each of these diversities in ways that validate and affirm them in their own right. Check mark, we got that one too. The elephant in the room, the last frontier, the overdue and much dreaded discussion, and the real gut level and gut wrenching work, it's about race, my friends. I outed myself a few minutes ago and told you that I'm almost 64. And my son told me, don't hold my breath, looking for grandchildren. I'm just looking for the daughter-in-law. But that's another keynote. But I would hope that if I ever do have grandchildren, that they have a different experience. My wish is to get through one day, 1 hour, one 30-minute news broadcast without seeing my sons and increasingly my daughters dead and beaten on the streets, without seeing my daughter in a bikini surrounded by police officers watching her as she is assaulted by another police officer. That was a sexual assault from my lens. But that's from me as a black female. My prayer is that, as happened recently, when a teacher asked a second grader, little black boy, what do you want to be when you grow up? And his answer is alive. My prayer is that that goes away for my grandchildren. We can no longer afford to go around this conversation, to go under it, to go over it. To not do the work around race and racism is unfathomable. It's sad, and it's downright dangerous. And the only way to resolution and healing is through it. And we will all, black people, white people, Asians, Latinos, and Native and indigenous people, gay, straight, Jews and Gentiles and Muslims, male, female, trans, we will all be better off for it. And as Guillaume Apollinaire, in a very simple poem, calls on each of us to do, he says, go to the edge, the voice said. No, they said, we will fall. Go to the edge, the voice said. No, they said, we will be pushed over. Go to the edge. So they did. And they were pushed over. And they flew. And with deference to R. Kelly, I believe we can fly. And so what I ask of each of us as I end, is whatever your tradition is, that you use your prayer, your mantra, your meditation, your beads, your candles, your rosaries, whatever it is for you, that you call on that higher source to guide us in doing this differently, to guide us in taking the risk to have the tough conversation, and more importantly, to guide us to heal. We are all in need, in desperate need of healing. And so, cultural competency has served its purpose. It's not an either-or, it's a both-and. We've done the diversity stuff. We've done the cultural competency stuff. We've done the embracing tolerance stuff. Our work now is to really go to that last conversation and then fly. Thank you.